Welcome to My Family Academy, where we believe that there is no greater history than understanding your own. In today's video, I want to cover three topics on the subject of slavery to dispel just a lot of ignorance that most black people in the United States have about their history when it comes to slavery. So I want to dispel some of that ignorance, at least for my family and both sides. And I hope this video brings you some enlightenment. So in point number one, I want to just show a slave record from 1860. And I just want to show you that not all black people were slaves. So let's review this document. So this is the 1860 slave schedule, as you can see on the screen here. This is for the slave owner in Felton. I came across this record helping a friend of mine whose last name is Felton. I was helping him do some research on his ancestry, and he had some information that his father left him, and he had this name here as a slave owner. And according to the story, you know, that was where they got their last name from what he was told. But that's why I want to go into this, at least for my family, and prove like this is not the circumstance that is true for all black people, like so many people assume. Like I've heard so many elders and people my age and younger that, you know, say in ignorance, because we didn't learn this history in school. That's why this channel is all about understanding our own history. Is that you know, we got our last names from slaves. Like, oh, well, our last name probably came from our slave plantation owner, which is just not. It's just not accurate. So this slave owner's name was in Felton, and he or she had, I want to say he had 12 slaves. So as you can see on the slave record here, they didn't even name the slaves. They only gave the gender and the age of a slave. So that right there, number one, dispels that the slaves were named after their owners. So with this owner being in Felton, that means that all 12 people on this slavery list would have the last name Felton because this was the person that owned them. Now, see, there was a female 85, a male 75, a male 43. I mean, you have someone here as young as 6. You have a female on here as young as 4. I can tell you that, you know, from looking at this, I highly doubt that these people were getting beat with whips and being tortured if this female at the top of the list was 85 years old and still a slave. So that's just something to think about. I honestly think that slavery is no different than what we call employment today. That's what I believe. I believe this was an indentured servitude. And I think that there were just some people, if you were happy, you just stayed and worked on the plantation that you worked at and who you worked for, if they treated you well. No different than what your employer and employment does today if you work at Boeing for 40 years. I believe, from what I'm learning doing this research, that's the conclusion that I'm coming to. We've been fed the Hollywood story of, you know, getting beat with whips and getting our name changed and coming from Africa. But I just want to show here on this 1860 Federal Census slave schedule, and these records are online on Ancestry.com, that here is a slave record, and it has an owner of in Felton with 12 slaves, and no names are given, just their ages. And this is part 1. I'll follow up with another part 2. Okay, now here in part 2, I want to prove that all black people didn't get their last name from their quote unquote slave owners. Like, to dispel that ignorance that we have amongst one another. And for my family here, those that listen to this, I hope you learned something. So this is the record in the Indian Territory for my great-great-grandfather, Andy Black. My ancestors were the Chickasaw Indians that went into the Indian Territory and settled there after the Indian Removal Act of, I think it was 1830. I know the president that entered that legislation into law was Andrew Jackson, the same president that the current president Donald Trump has a picture of Andrew Jackson on his wall in the White House today, ironically. But here is my great grandfather, Andy Black, right here at the top. Him right there. And he was 42 at this time. Turn that off. Okay. This was his freedman. Well, they called him freedman, but this was his enrollment in the Dawes Roll. If you do some research on the Dawes Roll, this is how they cheated my ancestors out of our land and what is now today the state of Oklahoma. But at this time, it was known as the Indian Territory. So, on this enrollment card, he indicates that he was a slave. And his slave owner's name was Humphrey Colbert. Now, his name, let me circle that. This was his slave owner, Humphrey Colbert. His first and last name was Andy Black. So this part here in part 2 dispels that black people who experienced slavery did not get their last name from their quote unquote slave owner. In part 1, I showed that not all black people were or experienced slavery. So let me get my marks off of there. So this is part 2, and then I'll just go ahead and close this out here with part 3, just showing some of the latest updates that I found with the Mitchell family, again proving not all black people were slaves, because I have not been able to find any documentation like this for anyone on my mother's side of the family that actually experienced slavery, and there is some documented history of it. So I'll go ahead and close this part out right here. But as you see, Humphrey Colbert was my great-great-grandfather's owner in the Indian Territory. Okay, and finally, to close out in part 3 here, I am looking at the U.S. Civil War soldier records and profiles from the years of 1861 to 1865. This is for the great-grandfather of Horace Mitchell. This would be Horace Mitchell that we know. This would be his great-great-grandfather. But this is the great-grandfather of Horace Mitchell Sr. As you can see here, he was in the army. He was in the military, and so that was something that Horace Mitchell inherited clearly from his forefathers, as he was a military man as well. But he was enlisted from 1861 to 1865. Slavery was abolished in 1865. So if he was a soldier for 4 years in the military for the United States government, he clearly was never a slave, and he was in the military before slavery was abolished. So again, that's just to prove my final point that there's no history of slavery on my mother's side of the family. I showed you in the last segment that there was clear records of slavery on my father's side in the Indian Territory. The first record I showed was a slave record from 1860, showing that they didn't even name the slaves on the records that they have. They only gave their gender and age and who their slave owner was. So this right here, again, he was in the military for 4 years, and he fought on the side of the Union. So I'm gonna close this out, but I believe that the Civil War was fought over labor to some degree, from what we know as slavery to the current employment that we have today. I believe moving forward, as they're continuing to say that there will be a civil war in this country now, I believe that's going to be concerning as they move to a completely digital currency for those that go ahead and just adopt to that new system versus those that resist adopting to a fully digital system, which would be like people like myself, because if they take all cash out of the currency exchange, then we can be digitally controlled, and it will be a digital prison, which is what they're trying to build now. And the people that are controlling the majority of those decisions start with J and end with ish. Ooish. I won't say, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. But I'll go ahead and close this out here. Just want to show that there's no history of slavery on my mother's side of the family. Not all black people were slaves, and black people did not get their last names from slave or plantation owners. Okay, I hope you learned something. This is My Family Academy, where we believe that there is no greater history than understanding your own. I'll close out there. Thanks for listening.